Do you imagine yourself living underwater in a submarine? What do you think it feels like? Well, while we think that living inside a submarine is exciting, the truth is it isn't that pleasant, especially since submarines are typically small in size. It's also possible that the inside will stink. There is a high possibility that you can't see the sun or feel its heat for about some weeks or even months. Have you ever felt as if you're trapped inside a little box that you can't move freely? Well, submarines are kind of like that. They can be extremely claustrophobic, feeling like your every move must be calculated carefully. You might be thinking by now that living inside a submarine is the worst thing you can ever do. But there's something even worse. It's being inside a broken submarine that's sinking to the ocean's bottom. Let's go back to World War II, and the Mediterranean region in particular. This was a period when the British Navy was fighting the Italian Navy for control of the sea. The often crystal clear waters contained disaster that is waiting to happen for the submarines. Some were attacked by bombing from the air, while others were destroyed by ships armed with depth charges. And there are submarines that simply collided with mines. As a result of these various occupational risks, 2 out of 5 British submarines that entered the Mediterranean during the war sank. What happens now that the submarine is sunk? Unfortunately, the submarine will now serve as a mass iron coffin for all of the crew that was on board during the time. That's the only thing it can do. The British Navy lost 79 submarines during the war, with only 4 that managed to escape. This means that there is only a 5% chance of surviving if you were in one of those submarines. It's also worth noting that the most peculiar of the 4 successful escapes is the not-so-familiar story of the HMS Perseus submarine and its single survivor. HMS Perseus was a British submarine stationed at Alexandria in British Egypt. Their main task was to secretly move supplies to the island of Malta. The island of Malta means a lot to the British Navy, for it was their strategic outpost in the Mediterranean. It was on the 26th of November in 1941 when the submarine left Malta and returned back to Alexandria for additional supplies. While on the way, happens their second task, which is to monitor the waters of the southern Aegean surrounding the Greek islands. However, on the night of December 6, the submarine Perseus collided with a mine off the coast of Kefalonia, and there it began sinking. There were 61 people inside the mentioned submarine, with 59 of them crew members, while the other 2 were passengers. One of those 2 passengers was a man named John Capes, who is also considered as the submarine's sole survivor. How does Capes manage to survive in the sunken submarine? Well, his story goes something like this. He was relaxing in a makeshift bunk in the torpedo tube when the submarine hit the mine. He was shocked by the loud explosion. After the explosion, the lights in the entire submarine went out. He was thrown across the room as the submarine twisted, and later on, the submarine then sank into the cold sea's dark depths before crashing to the bottom, which was 170 feet from sea level. Capes noticed that despite the darkness, he could still stand up, and after some searching, luckily, he found a flashlight. Even though Capes couldn't see anything due to the darkness, he managed to find his way into the submarine's engine room. The other thing that he needed to endure, aside from darkness, is the growing foul air and rising water level inside. He saw mangled bodies of at least a dozen dead people while finding the engine's room. However, he couldn't get any further since the room on the other side was already totally filled with water. He promptly began looking for anyone else who could still be alive. He was able to find 3 more men who he brought together in the engine room. They then proceeded to escape the chamber located just above the room, where they discovered 2 sets of escape suits. However, finding these suits does not guarantee that they will be saved, especially since these escape suits can only be used to a maximum of 100 feet. and only have adequate oxygen for that distance. Their gauges indicated that they were 270 feet below the surface, but their gauges were broken, which they were unaware of. The truth is that they were 171 feet below the surface of the ocean. That means they have to swim 71 feet without any oxygen. They all assumed, however, that they had to swim 171 feet without oxygen. Whatever the case, it's going to be difficult. Nobody had ever done anything like it before, so they knew they would be breaking the world record for the deepest ever escape. Of course, it is only if they were successful in doing so. Oxygen within the submarine was continuously decreasing as time passed. Capes had no choice but to take one more sip from a bottle of rum that had flooded the escape compartment. Exerting so much force, he then managed to loosen the damaged bolts on the escape compartment. He pushed the other 3 men out first, before he went out himself. However, even if they were able to move out, there was a second major issue, which all of them were aware of. If they were to swim to the surface of the ocean from a depth of hundreds of feet where they were positioned, there would be a sudden change in pressure on all of their bodies. This sudden pressure would certainly cause the bends, a condition in which gases inside the body begin to rise. In severe situations, this can result in excruciating pain, paralysis, and even death. With this, they had 2 choices. It was either they die because of the bends or from drowning in the submarine. As a result, they all took the first choice. However, on a cold December night though, it was only Capes who managed to reach the surface of the ocean. He was suffering from the bends, and the pain in his lungs was terrible, but it didn't stop there. The fact that he was now alone, because none of the other 3 men survived and reached the surface, was even more painful and demoralizing. After a while, he did see a set of white cliffs off in the distance that belonged to the Greek island of Kefalonia. He then began urgently swimming toward them. The shore was 5 miles away, but Capes made it. He was found washed up on the beach the next morning, unconscious, by a couple of local Greek fishermen. However, the island was occupied by the Italian army at the time, so he was forced to hide and stay in the basement of his rescuer's home. Capes survived the next 18 months of his life by moving from one house to another on the island in an attempt to avoid capture by the Italians. During this time, he lost 70 pounds. He even dyed his hair black in order to blend in better with the locals. The Royal Navy arranged a rescue operation 18 months later, in May 1943. Capes was the only survivor of a submarine that sank to the ocean's bottom and became a washed-up refugee. He was discreetly transported from Kefalonia to Smyrna through a small fishing boat. Capes never expected that it would take him 18 months to get back to Alexandria. Capes received a medal from the British Empire for his heroism. Despite this, the majority of people will not trust his story due to the following reasons. First, when the Perseus submarine departed Malta, Capes' name wasn't written on the crew list. Second, all British submarines' escape doors were locked from the outside in the hopes to avoid being blasted off during a depth charge attack, told as an order to the commanders. Third, he had no witnesses to back up his claims. Fourth, he had a reputation for being a brilliant and natural storyteller. Additionally, his version of events would change every time following the war's end. Furthermore, his claim of escaping from a depth of 270 feet made things much more difficult for most people to accept. By the time Capes died in 1985, John Capes was widely thought to be a liar and even a fake. It was only in 1997, 12 years after his death, that his miraculous survival story could be authenticated and proven. That year, the HMS Perseus was finally discovered at the bottom of the Mediterranean. After a series of dives into the Perseus submarine, researchers were able to find the empty torpedo tube where Capes had built his bunk. Also, the escape hatch compartment opened just as he described. They also saw the bottle of rum from which Capes claimed that he had taken a final gulp before leaving the compartment. The depth at which Capes was located was proven to be 171 feet, and the gauges reading 270 feet were discovered and proven broken. The wreck of the Perseus was discovered exactly as Capes had narrated it. This makes his claim as the submarine's only survivor to be true. However, it's sad that he already died before he could receive the recognition he deserved. The discovery of the Perseus wreck in the bottom of the Mediterranean has provided historians with all the evidence they needed to confirm John Capes' extraordinary survival story. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe and click the bell button to be notified when new videos are posted. And as always, thanks for watching.